I trust the devil when the devil is calling. Whenever I'm together with the gold bugs crawling. Praise to the man who stands so fat and fights so quick as fast as lightning.
I get really high on adrenaline when you commit a murder like that.
When you make up your mind you're going to perpetrate this crime or any kind of crime, it's going to be hard for you to stop in the middle of your action.
Yeah, I'm pretty much focused. I set out to do what I did to those victims that day, and I made the decision that I was going to kill them even prior, before they got into my vehicles. Once they got into my vehicles, it was a done shut deal for me.
Joseph Kondro described himself as an alligator in waiting, an alligator resting at the bottom of a pond. Sometimes he came up to feed on small children, saying it was an adrenaline rush and addicting to be the predator hunting its prey. Kondro was unique among serial child killers in that he abducted and murdered children of people he actually knew. He is known as the LONGVIEW serial killer, as all of his victims were in or near Longview, Washington. He was implicated in the kidnapping, essay, and murder of 3 victims in the 1980s and 90s. Kondro may have 70 children, and he has likely killed other children. Yet Kondro has only confessed to the murders of 2 little girls in Washington state. Kondro knew that if he confessed to a third, he would be eligible for the death penalty. This is the true crime story of a predator that preyed on the children of his friends. Hello, my name is Holly, and this is The Murder She Shed, the place we honor the dead right from my she shed. Hit the subscribe button if you would like to hear rarely discussed true crime right from my she shed. Come on back. Don't give me any smack. You get to hear some true crime that is really whack. And my awful rhymes. Yeah, that could be a plus or a minus, depending on how you think about it. Anyway, let's get started. Joseph Robert Kondro was born on May 19, 1959 in Marquette, Michigan to a Chippewa mother named Elizabeth Curtis. Elizabeth had only a 6th grade education and ended up having 10 pregnancies with an abusive husband. She had several miscarriages and ended up with 6 children. He was adopted at birth by a white couple, John and Eleanor Kondro, without the birth couple even signing away their rights. John and Eleanor raised him in Iron River, Michigan, before then moving the family to Castle Rock, Washington. After moving to Castle Rock, Kondro began attending a Catholic school there. His adoptive mother affectionately called him Joey, and he was very much a mama's boy. Joey would call his mama Mama Bear. He often was made fun of by other children at his school because of his dark skin and his parents having light skin. Kondro's parents told him from an early age that he was adopted. Kondro showed psychopathic tendencies from a very early age, including engaging in frequent fights with other children, killing animals, including the neighborhood pets, wielding a knife, and drinking alcohol as early as age 7. Also around the age of 7, he began to manipulate girls around his same age to show him their naked bodies and try to touch them. He learned at an early age what girls were vulnerable, which ones did not have much of a home life and were not watched out for or cared for. He knew this at an early age, which ones that would not tell on him. He learned all the tricks and trades of, this weird pedophile world. Joey's father was physically and mentally abusive to him and referred to him as his mother's son. As he became older, Joey began to fantasize about and murdering his victims. As a young teen, he put together a kit and kidnapped a young woman. Although Joey got older, his victims stayed the same age. Joe went on to have 6 children of his own by 3 different women. Joe found work as a mill worker in Longview, Washington. He was known to be good with kids. Joe never used any of his own children, but used them to get to their friends. His preferences was blonde girls around the ages of 7 years old. Joey was able to come off as quite charming and personable. This allowed him to win the trust of those around him, which he used in the commission of his crimes, often perpetrated against the young daughters of his friends. With friends like that, who needs enemies? He had 3 daughters by his first wife, Peggy. Peggy often babysat other people's children, and Joe used this opportunity to find victims. One of these victims ended up telling their mother, and Joe was arrested for child. While he was in jail, his first marriage ended. In 1996, Joe met and married a woman named Julie. He fathered 2 more daughters with Julie. I'm unsure where the 6th child is brought into the story. So after he married Julie, he then had 2 more daughters. And due to Joe's drug abuse, he had fits of rage in which he would attack Julie. Julie quickly got tired of his rages and divorced him. Kara Patricia Rudd was born on March 26, 1994 in Longview. She was a pupil at Longview's Monticello Middle School, and in 1996 she was 12 years old. Kara was a popular and successful girl with no behavioral issues, so she was not suspected as a runaway when she disappeared on November 21, 1996. Joe was a childhood friend of Kara's mother. He had frequently stayed in the family's garage before being evicted due to his chronic drinking issues. The 12-year-old was last seen by her friend on a November morning when she skipped to school. When she did not come back home, police launched a search party for her, but found no evidence of where she had been. Based on a hunch that Kondro often visited Mount Solo, the police searched there and found the remains of Kara on January 4, 1997, 40 days after her disappearance. The officers located Kara's black shirt inside the rusted shell of an abandoned Volkswagen car. Only the lower part of Kara's body had been preserved inside the rusty automobile. The car had acted like a makeshift refrigerator, preserving the lower half of her body. They were able to recover enough DNA from to tie Kondro to the crime. Before the actual abduction, he went on a test run with Kara and one of her friends. One fall day in 1996, he took Kara and a friend to an abandoned house on the banks of the Columbia River. The next time they entered his vehicle, he had plans to essay and kill them both. He had already picked the place where he would dump their bodies, a spot chosen on one of his many long drives through the dense forest around Longview. His cruising was part of the game, a chance to savor the anticipation.
Yeah, I knew Kara for a while. We'd play cards together and stuff.
How would you describe her person? I mean, as a kid?
She was very energetic, but she was very defiant too when she believed in things. You gotta admire that in anybody. That morning when I woke up, I knew what I was going to do. I was completely aware of what I wanted to do. I drove to the school and I pulled into the parking lot. Kara jumped in my car.
On November 21st, Joe drove by Kara and her friend near their school while on his way to drop off a job application. He stopped and talked to the girls and agreed to help Kara skip class. When he came by the school later, Kara hopped right into his gold Firebird. Lucky for her friend, she made the choice not to skip class that day. Joe took Kara to an abandoned house where he beat and strangled her, then loaded her body into his car. Off a logging road onto Mount Solo, he wedged the body under a rusted shell of an abandoned Volkswagen he had found in a deep ravine. After Kara went missing, her friend came forward and let authorities know who had picked Kara up that morning. By then, the killer had covered his tracks. He had washed his clothes, showered, and thrown away his shoes. Police searched his home and questioned him, but came away empty-handed. However, he did have lacerations on his skin, which he couldn't explain to the police. In the end, they found Kara's body and DNA led authorities straight back to him.
I just drove her out to the house and we talked a little bit.
But happy though, right? I mean, it's not. She doesn't know she's in danger.
No, she doesn't know she's like I said. I was playing on my victim's trust, and that's a big thing. When you do these kind of crimes, is the person has to trust you for you to lure them in. She had no idea that'd be her last day alive on this planet.
You knew right from wrong, but you just couldn't control the urges.
And I knew exactly what I was getting into. Exactly. And I didn't care.
After learning that Kondro had murdered Kara, this led authorities straight to another murder of a child in which Kondro was the friend of a family in which a little girl had went missing. Joe Kondro was facing the death penalty for the murder of Kara, but he was told that if he confessed to the murder of 8-year-old RIMA Traxler, then he could avoid the death penalty. RIMA Danette Traxler was born on November 9, 1976 in Longview, Washington. Studying in 3rd grade at St. Helens Elementary School, she adored going to school and attending the art classes especially. She was last seen by a neighbor living 2 blocks from her home on the afternoon of May 15, 1985. After showing the neighbor her art project, the 8-year-old proceeded toward her house, but never reached the residence. Joe confessed that on May 15, 1995, he was driving to the store for beer and cigarettes when he saw little Rima walking home from St. Helens Elementary School. Rima's parents were his close friends. She trusted him like family. Just that morning, he had been at her home drinking beer with her stepdad, an old high school pal. He knew if he pulled over and she got in, he would end her life that day. Unfortunately for Rima, she got in Uncle Joe's vehicle. Kara's family had taught her about stranger danger. During the 80s and 90s, stranger danger was an educational safety program to make children more aware of danger. Back then, it was all about strangers in a white van offering you candy. I should know. I grew up in that era. My mom warned me lots of times to stay away from people that offered you candy.
That's Jenny. But that's not Jenny's dad. If she gets into that car, you may be looking at Jenny for the last time. I'm McGruff, the crime dog. Let me show you something. See that playground? A lot of kids there. Every day in this country, 60 kids disappear.
What was not discussed too often was the fact that it is often an individual who the child most trusts that is the most danger. As in this case, it was a man that was trusted by the family. Rima and her sister called him Uncle Joe. Rima's family told her never to get in a car with someone or walk off with someone unless they knew the family safety password. It was taught in the stranger danger that to give your child a password and only go with the person that knows that password. Rima's password happened to be unicorn. One day when Joe and Rima's stepdad were talking, her dad mentioned that her safety word was unicorn. This would be a deadly mistake. Joe had tricked Rima into entering his vehicle by mentioning the word unicorn. I mean, he wasn't a stranger after all. He was Uncle Joe. Not only that, he knew the password, so she got in. Kondro drove to a remote swimming area on Germany Creek west of town. He used a rock to hit little Rima over the head and then strangled her to death with his hands. Joe claimed from her abduction until her murder, it took only 45 minutes.
The fantasy is only a motivation. There's nothing better than the act itself.
Joe, just describe for me the feelings that you have during the assault and the killing.
Power.
How about control?
Yeah, that's another. I get really, really high on adrenaline when you commit a murder like that.
When Rima didn't return home from school, her desperate mother went to Kondro for help. Rima's mother even used Joe's phone to call in the missing persons report. After confessing to Rima's murder, he explained how and where he hid her small body beneath debris under a tree, but investigators still have never found her little body. By the terms of the plea deal, he was sentenced to 55 years in prison at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. Joe has been suspected of more than 70 slayings, but he refused to admit to any more murders. Over the years, detectives have tried to persuade him that he could do right by the families of the victims to help recover bodies and end agonizing mysteries, but he had no guilt or regret in anything he has done.
I have no regrets, no.
No regrets back to 1985 with your first victim? Any regrets there?
No.
How about 1996? Any regrets there?
No.
Anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, I would have took her out to a different spot.
So she wouldn't have been found?
Well, that was the idea. That was the intention.
Although he never confessed to the murder of 8-year-old CHILA SILVERNAILS, he is very much a suspect in her murder. CHILA SILVERNAILS was born October 13, 1973 in Cullah, Washington. The second grader was the youngest daughter of Dawn, a truck driver in Blanche SILVERNAILS. Her mother said she was a happy-go-lucky kind of girl that was full of life. On April 20th, 1982, CHILA headed to catch the school bus. CHILA did not arrive on the return bus, and her sister found only her new lunch pail at the bus stop. The family grew concerned when their brother could not locate CHILA even at her playmate's house, and the police were informed. The police dispersed teams to conduct a search. The following morning, a search dog found her partially clothed little body at the bottom of a ravine that was located about 3 miles from her home. She had been essayed, stabbed in the throat, and asphyxiated, possibly by the killer pressing a hand over her mouth and nose. Similar to Kondro's other murders, he was a drinking buddy of Dawn, CHILA's dad. There was never any evidence linking him to CHILA's murder, so Joe was never convicted in her murder. Joe would never admit to another murder due to his fear of the death penalty. Joe died at the young age of 52 on May 3, 2012. Kondro died in prison of liver disease likely related to hepatitis C infection. Joe Kondro took any further murders to the grave with him. Famed FBI profiler John Douglas is actually the one that interviewed Joe. He was one of the first criminal profilers. While traveling around the country providing instructions to police, Douglas began interviewing serial killers and other violent offenders at various prisons. He interviewed some of the most notable violent criminals in recent history as part of the study. And he is also on that show Mindhunter. They actually didn't do a new season on, which is upsetting to me because I really like that show. He was actually one of the individuals that the show was pretty much about. The interview with Joe Kondro was instrumental in learning about how a killer's mind works. This was one of those cases where we can learn that sometimes there are people that we think we can trust with our children that really are filled with evil. I think we should be more cautious in listening to our mother instincts when something doesn't feel right. It probably isn't. All right, guys, hope y'all have a great weekend. By the time I get this recorded and edited, it should be probably the weekend. I will end up with a few bloopers and Simon in order to not leave you sad as usual. Hopefully that'll help you out. Be good out there. Be blessed this weekend, and I love y'all. Bye. An alligator resting at the bottom. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button, because I will tell you some true crime with a whack. And with my German Shepherd Simon and my lab Max that are noisy every time I film. You gotta breathe straight into the mic, huh? He often was made fun of by other children at his school because of his dark skin and his parents having light skin. But are we sure it's not because he called his mama Mama Bear? In Cullah, Washington. I don't know how to say that. Cullah, Washington. I'm sorry, Washington. I'm doing the best I can with that name. That's a tricky one. Joan was never convicted of her murder. Oh my God. He was never convicted of her. Oh my God, I can't speak. Joe Kondro took any further murders to the grave with him. Famed FBI profiler John Douglas is actually the one that interviewed Joe. Can we not? Can we not? Can we lay down, please? He was one of the first criminal profilers. When I was little, I had an uncle that thought he was a cowboy. He probably never been around a horse in his life, but he wore cowboy boots and cowboy hats, and he would come over as my dad's brother. And my dad, who was the best guy in the whole world, you'll never meet a better guy. Well, his brother was quite the opposite. He's a very selfish individual. I don't know how the same mama bred both of these, but she did. And anyway, he would come out, and when I was little, I didn't understand who he actually was, but he would come out, and he's a very strange character. He used to always come out and squish red ants on the ground, and he'd call them little piss ants, and he'd take his little pointed cowboy boots and squish those red ants. And I thought, that is super cool. I'm going to do that. So I started squishing red ants. But what I got most out of that is that I love the word pissant. I mean, I thought that was an amazing word. I mean, I didn't get to cuss, but that sounded like a cuss word to me when I was a little girl, and so I was like, I'm using that. I'm using that every chance I get. So when my cousins came over to play, I decided to climb on top of this slide so I couldn't get slapped too much, and every time they tried to come up, I would kick at them and I'd call them pissants. I repeatedly call them pissants like I was cussing like no tomorrow. Well, I got in trouble. Yeah. My mom come out there after I was told ratted on by my cousins, and she threatened to wash my mouth out with soap, and I said, but my uncle says that. And she's like, don't say everything your uncle says. Although at the time I thought he was great. I thought, oh, he's so cool. He's got cowboy boots and all this. He was kind of nuts. He was really kind of nuts. Say bye, love y'all. Peace out, be good. We love y'all. We hope y'all have a great week.
Never trust the devil when the devil is calling. Whenever I'm together with the gold bugs crawling. Praise to the man who stands up fighting. Fight so quick as fast as lightning.